The wind howled across the frozen coast that morning, carrying with it the scent of metal, salt, and something ancient buried beneath the ice. For years, the people of that quiet northern town had whispered stories about the strange lights that flickered under the sea and the old research station that stood alone on the cliffs. Most dismissed it as superstition, the kind of talk that only old fishermen kept alive to scare the younger ones. But those who had seen the lights themselves knew something was wrong. Something powerful had been sleeping under those waters for a long time, and someone had finally woken it up. It began decades ago, long before the Empire sent its fleet into those same waters. Back then, the research station was known as Station 47, a small secret facility run by a group of scientists who were said to be working on energy experiments for national defense. The world was changing fast. Governments were desperate to find new power sources, something that could replace fossil fuels and give them an advantage in war. Station 47 was built for that purpose, to study a strange form of energy found deep within the Earth's crust. At first, everything went smoothly. The scientists discovered that beneath the ocean floor lay veins of a glowing mineral that emitted strange pulses, almost like a heartbeat. When tested, the mineral released bursts of energy stronger than any nuclear reactor could produce, but without the deadly radiation. The team believed they had found the key to endless power. They called it Project Helios. But no one outside the research group ever heard about Project Helios again. Within 2 years, the station was shut down without explanation. The government claimed the project had failed and sealed the facility. Local workers were told to forget what they had seen. The area around it became restricted, and soon the world forgot it even existed. Decades later, the Empire, a powerful military alliance that ruled most of the modern world, began expanding its control into the northern seas. They claimed it was for trade and research, but everyone knew it was about power. The Empire's navy was unmatched, and its leaders wanted to test their new warships in the same waters where Station 47 once stood. They believed the area was abandoned, nothing more than a quiet patch of ocean with old myths attached to it. But they were wrong. Far from the Empire's capital, a small group of independent researchers had been tracking unusual magnetic waves coming from that very location. One of them, a middle-aged engineer who had once worked at the station in his youth, noticed that the patterns of those waves matched the old energy readings from Project Helios. He couldn't believe it. The experiment that was supposed to be shut down had somehow restarted, but who could have done it? He tried contacting the authorities, warning them that something under the ocean was active again, but no one listened. The Empire dismissed his concerns, saying it was probably geological activity or natural radiation. Desperate to prove he wasn't wrong, he and a few close friends decided to return to the frozen coast where it all began. When they reached the cliffs, the air itself felt strange, thick with static, humming like a distant engine. The old research buildings were still there, half buried in snow, rusted and silent. But inside, the equipment still worked. Screens flickered with faint lights, and deep in the lower chambers, the hum grew louder, pulsing in a steady rhythm. It was like the heartbeat of the Earth itself. The group descended into the lowest chamber, a large dome built around a glass cylinder that went straight into the rock below. Inside the cylinder, they could see it, the same glowing mineral, shining brighter than ever before. Somehow, after all those years, it had reactivated on its own. The man's hands trembled as he stared at it. It wasn't just energy, it was alive. He began recording everything, collecting data, and trying to understand what had triggered the reaction. But as the readings climbed higher, he realized the energy output was beyond control. The mineral wasn't just reacting to their presence. It was responding to something bigger, something coming from above the ocean. It was sensing movement. The Empire's fleet was approaching the area. Hundreds of miles away, the Empire's command ship cut through the icy waves. The admiral in charge had received reports of strange electromagnetic interference in the region, but he wasn't concerned. He believed it was just a storm. Their mission was to demonstrate the fleet's power, a show of strength meant to remind smaller nations who ruled the seas. No one aboard knew that the storm they were heading into wasn't made of clouds or wind, but something far more dangerous. Back at Station 47, the ground began to shake. The energy core was growing unstable, its pulse faster and stronger, sinking with the approach of the fleet. The engineer tried to shut it down, but the control systems no longer responded. It was as if the machine itself had taken control. The others shouted for him to leave, but he refused. He had built this system years ago. He knew the only way. To stop it was to cut off the main conduits manually, deep inside the containment chamber. He ran through the narrow tunnels, lights flickering around him as the hum grew into a roar. The deeper he went, the more he felt the pressure of something immense, like a consciousness pressing against his mind. The energy core was no longer just a machine. It was awake, aware, and angry. Through the thick glass of the containment tube, the mineral seemed to pulse faster, sending bursts of light that illuminated the entire chamber. He reached the main control valve and pulled the emergency lever with all his strength. For a moment, everything went quiet. The hum stopped, the lights dimmed, and the air felt still. He thought he had done it. But then, from deep below came a low rumble, like thunder beneath the sea. Miles away, the Empire's fleet detected a massive energy spike on their radars. It looked like an explosion, but the readings made no sense. The Admiral ordered all ships to slow down. Moments later, the ocean began to glow. A pale blue light spread beneath the waves, forming circles that expanded outward. The sailors stared, in disbelief. The sea was lighting up like a living thing, and then it happened. A blinding flash that reached the sky, followed by a shockwave that tore through the water. The fleet's communication systems went dead. Engines failed. Metal twisted and screamed as waves the size of mountains rose from the depths. It wasn't an explosion in the normal sense. It was a surge of raw energy, the same energy the scientists had once tried to control. The storm of light and force ripped through the Empire's ships like they were made of paper. Back at the station, the engineer watched from the upper deck, unable to speak. The entire ocean seemed to burn with light. The Empire's fleet, dozens of the most advanced ships ever built, vanished into the glowing mist. In just a few minutes, the mighty Empire's presence in those waters was erased. When the light finally faded, all that remained was silence. The sea returned to calm, as if nothing had happened. The energy readings dropped to 0. The core had shut itself down once more. The engineer stood there trembling, realizing what he had just witnessed. Earth's forgotten experiment, something mankind had built and then buried, had awakened only to defend itself, or maybe the planet, from those who sought to control it. He recorded a final message before the system completely shut down. His voice was calm but filled with sorrow. "We should have never disturbed it," he said softly. "It wasn't ours to use. It was Earth's, and we forgot that." When rescue teams arrived weeks later, they found the station empty. No trace of the researchers remained. The Empire never publicly admitted what had happened, but rumors spread quickly. Satellite images showed a massive dead zone in the ocean where their fleet had vanished. No wreckage, no survivors, just a perfect circle of lifeless water. Scientists who studied the event later described it as an energy anomaly. Some said it was a geological reaction. Others called it a natural defense mechanism of the planet. But those who had read the old reports from Project Helios knew the truth. The Earth itself had fought back. And so, the story of Station 47 was once again buried in secrecy. The Empire rebuilt, pretending nothing had happened. But deep beneath the frozen sea, the energy core still pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat waiting to be awakened again. The news about the vanished fleet spread like wildfire across the world. At first, the Empire tried to hide it. They released official statements claiming their ships were lost during a massive storm in the northern seas. But people weren't fools. The families of the missing sailors wanted answers, and the story was too strange to be covered up completely. Fishermen who worked near the restricted zone spoke of seeing the sky turn white that night. Some said the ocean itself glowed, as if it was alive. The Empire's communication systems went silent for hours, and strange electromagnetic waves spread across nearby countries. Radios crackled with static. Compasses spun wildly. Even satellites above the region malfunctioned for a few minutes. It was clear something unnatural had happened out there. Inside government halls, panic grew. The Empire's top commanders held secret meetings, trying to understand what kind of weapon could erase an entire fleet without leaving debris. Some thought it was an attack from a rival power. Others believed the energy came from the ocean floor itself, but no one could agree. The data didn't match any known weapon. The only person who might have known the truth, the engineer who had worked at Station 47, was missing. In a small coastal town far from the capital, a local fisherman found a washed-up metal case tangled in seaweed. Inside were a few notebooks, a recording device, and a photo of the old research station. The handwriting was shaky but clear. It described something called Project Helios and the discovery of a living energy beneath the Earth's crust. The man didn't understand the science, but he felt uneasy reading it. When he tried to hand the case over to the authorities, they took it away and warned him not to talk about it. But word still spread. People began whispering that the sea had taken revenge. Weeks later, the Empire sent a small recovery team to the area where the fleet had disappeared. The team was told to collect data, but no one expected to find survivors. The first few days of the mission were quiet. The ocean looked calm, almost too calm. The ship's instruments still behaved strangely, but nothing else happened. Then, on the third day, one of the divers spotted something deep below. The remains of a warship twisted like paper and covered in a thin layer of glowing dust. When the divers tried to take samples, their equipment began to fail. The cameras flickered. Their oxygen meters gave false readings. The divers quickly returned to the surface, terrified. The dust wasn't ordinary sediment. It reacted to movement and gave off a faint pulse, like a heartbeat. Scientists on board were shocked. They realized this was the same mineral once found at Station 47, the same material that powered the forgotten experiment. Back at the Empire's research center, the recovered samples caused more confusion. Under the microscope, the particles seemed to move slightly on their own as if alive. When exposed to light or sound, they emitted small bursts of energy. The researchers were both fascinated and afraid. They didn't tell the public what they found. Instead, the Empire ordered all records of Project Helios to be unsealed for review. That's when the truth began to surface. Old reports showed that decades ago, the experiment had been abandoned because the energy source became unstable. It had reacted violently when pushed beyond a certain threshold. Some scientists believed it was a kind of planetary energy, deeply connected to the Earth's natural balance. When they tried to harness it for military use, it began to respond unpredictably, as if resisting control. Those records were hidden away, labeled as failed experimentation. Now it was clear the Empire's fleet hadn't been destroyed by an enemy. They had disturbed something ancient and powerful, something that was part of the planet itself. The ministers didn't know how to explain that to the public. How could they tell people that the Earth had a defense mechanism? Among those reading the declassified files was a young journalist who had lost her brother in the vanished fleet. She had been searching for answers for weeks, frustrated by the Empire's lies. When she came across the name Station 47 in one of the reports, something clicked. She decided to travel north herself, to the frozen coast where it all began. The journey was rough. The closer she got to the old research zone, the stranger things became. Her compass stopped working, and her GPS kept resetting. Locals warned her not to go any further, saying that strange lights still appeared over the sea at night. But she didn't turn back. She had one goal: to find out what really happened to her brother and the others. When she finally reached the cliffs, she saw the remains of the research station half buried in snow and ice. The place looked abandoned, but it wasn't as silent as she expected. The wind carried a faint humming sound, low and rhythmic, like a machine breathing in its sleep. She entered one of the main buildings carefully. Dust covered everything, but some light still flickered weakly in the hallway. It was clear that the power source below was still alive. In one of the control rooms, she found a shattered monitor, displaying fragments of data. Among the frozen papers scattered across the floor, she discovered a recording, the engineer's final message. His tired voice echoed through the cold room. He spoke about how they had tried to shut the system down, how it reacted to the Empire's presence, and how he believed the energy was connected to the Earth itself. "We woke it up," he said, his voice shaking. "And now it watches." Her hands trembled as she listened. Everything she had feared was true. The fleet hadn't been destroyed by a weapon. It had been erased by something far beyond human understanding. She copied the recording and left quickly, realizing the place was starting to vibrate again. The faint hum was growing louder, as if the energy below recognized her presence. By the time she returned to town, she was determined to tell the world. But the Empire's intelligence agents were already waiting. They confiscated her camera, her audio recorder, and her notes. They warned her not to speak to anyone about what she found. "For the safety of the people," they said. Yet the way they said it didn't sound like protection, it sounded like fear. Despite their threats, she didn't stop. She began contacting independent scientists and whistleblowers who had once worked with the Empire. One of them told her that after the incident, the Empire started a new covert project, not to study the energy, but to find ways to control it. They believed if they could harness even a small fraction of its power, it would make them unstoppable. But those attempts didn't go well. Strange accidents began to happen in the research facilities. Machines overloaded without reason, walls cracked from unknown vibrations, and several researchers reported hearing whispers when near the samples. Some said it felt like the Earth was warning them to stop. Within months, most of the scientists involved either resigned or disappeared. The Empire quickly shut the new project down, labeling it classified. The journalist knew she was being watched, but the more she learned, the more determined she became. She began writing a secret report, documenting every piece of evidence she could gather. The declassified documents, the recordings, the scientists' testimonies. Her goal was to publish it all one day. Meanwhile, strange events continued near the northern seas. Satellites detected faint energy pulses every few weeks, each stronger than the last. Fishermen started noticing dead zones where nothing grew, no fish, no coral, just silent water. The area became completely restricted again, and the Empire built a new observation base miles away, claiming it was for environmental research. But those who lived nearby knew the truth. The Earth was still awake. Late one night, as the journalist sat by her window typing, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "If you want the truth, go back to where it started. He left something for you there." She froze. The message could only mean one thing: the missing engineer. Could he still be alive? She packed her bag once more and prepared to return north. She knew it was dangerous, but she couldn't stop now. The truth was buried beneath that frozen sea, and she was the only one willing to dig it up. Outside, the wind began to rise again, carrying that same low hum through the night. Somewhere deep under the ice, the energy core pulsed once, faint, but alive, like the heartbeat of something waiting to be remembered. Snow fell quietly over the cliffs as she made her way back to the north. The air was cold and sharp, and the world felt empty, as if time itself had stopped there. It had been weeks since she received that strange message, the one claiming the engineer had left something behind for her. She didn't know if it was real or just a trap, but she couldn't ignore it. The truth was too close now, and she could feel that something inside the Earth was stirring again. The train ride north was long and lonely. She stared out the window, watching the frozen landscape pass by like a dream. Endless stretches of white, scattered trees, and occasional signs of abandoned outposts from old research missions. The further she went, the weaker her phone signal became. Eventually, there was no connection at all. She was completely cut off from the rest of the world, just like the old Station 47 had been years ago. When she finally reached the last town before the frozen coast, she was greeted by silence. The people there spoke little, and those who did told her not to go any farther. They said the storms had returned and strange lights had been seen again over the sea. One elderly man at the inn where she stayed whispered that the earth was warning everyone to stay away. But her mind was made up. She couldn't turn back now. The next morning, she hired a small truck from a local mechanic and drove toward the cliffs. The road was covered in ice, and the wind blew fiercely, howling through the empty valleys. Every few miles she saw broken signs that once belonged to the Empire's research division, faded warnings about radiation and restricted zones. Most of them were half buried under snow. As she got closer to the old station, her car's dashboard lights began to flicker. The compass spun in circles and her radio gave out static mixed with faint whispers, almost like voices. She tried to ignore it, but her heart beat faster. She remembered the engineer's recording, how he said the energy was alive and could sense presence. By the time she reached the station, the sun was already setting behind thick gray clouds. The entire place was covered in frost. It looked like a frozen ghost of what it once was. Walls cracked, metal rusted, doors barely hanging on their hinges. Yet deep inside, the faint hum still echoed. The sound was exactly as she remembered, calm but constant, as if the earth was breathing beneath her feet. She wrapped her coat tightly and entered through a broken side door. The air inside was warmer than outside, which was strange because there was no power source that should have been working. The lights flickered again, faintly glowing for a few seconds at a time. It felt like the place knew she was there. She retraced her old path from her first visit, down the narrow hallways and past rooms filled with dust-covered monitors. When she reached the main control chamber, she noticed something new. Someone had been there recently. Footprints marked the floor, leading to a metal hatch that had been uncovered. She crouched down and brushed away the snow that had gathered around it. On the hatch was a small note, half frozen but still readable. It said only one line. "If you are reading this, it means it's still awake." Her hands shook as she read the words. She knew it had to be from him, the engineer. But what did he mean by still awake? The hum grew louder and the floor beneath her feet seemed to vibrate faintly. Taking a deep breath, she opened the hatch. A cold rush of air escaped from below. The tunnel was dark, with narrow metal stairs leading down into the lower chambers. She switched on her flashlight and began to descend carefully. The deeper she went, the stronger the vibration became, and soon she could hear faint beeping sounds, like machinery running after years of silence. After several minutes, she reached a large underground room. It was filled with control panels, most of them dead, but one corner screen was still flickering with blue light. On a small desk next to it lay a sealed envelope and an old data drive. The envelope had her name written on it, though she had never told anyone she was coming. Her heart pounded. She opened it slowly. Inside was a handwritten letter. The words were uneven, written with trembling hands, but the message was clear. The letter began with an apology. The engineer explained that he had stayed behind after the incident, hoping to understand what had gone wrong. He had realized something shocking. The energy core beneath Station 47 wasn't just a discovery. It was part of something much larger, something buried deep within the Earth long before humans existed. It wasn't a reactor, and it wasn't a weapon. It was like a heart, one of many, that helped regulate the balance of the planet. He wrote that when they had first tested the mineral decades ago, they had unknowingly connected to that heart. The more they tried to extract energy, the more unstable it became. It wasn't meant to be used. It was meant to stay hidden. When the Empire's fleet arrived years later, their massive engines and sonar waves disturbed the sleeping core again, and it responded like any living being would. It defended itself. But the letter also warned that the reaction had changed something. The core was no longer dormant. It had become aware of humanity's interference. The Earth now recognized humans as a potential threat to its balance. It listens now, the letter said, and it remembers. She felt a chill crawl up her spine. Her flashlight flickered, and for a second she thought she saw movement behind the glass chamber in the corner of the room. A faint blue glow shimmered through the frost-covered walls. The core was still there, pulsing slowly like a giant heartbeat. The letter continued. The engineer claimed he had spent the last years building a containment system, something that could keep the core from reacting again. But he admitted he wasn't sure if it would hold forever. The Earth's energy was beyond anything they could fully control. He left the data drive for her, saying it contained all his research evidence and logs, everything she would need to tell the world the truth. He ended his letter with one final warning. If the hum ever stops, it means it's no longer sleeping. Leave and never come back. Her hands trembled as she placed the letter down. The hum was still there, steady, low, alive. She inserted the data drive into the still-functioning monitor. Files began to open, one after another. Old video, logs, system readings, maps of underground energy lines that stretched across continents. There were dozens of them, all leading to similar energy points deep within the planet. The world had more than one core like this. Station 47 was just the northern one. Suddenly the monitor flickered and static filled the room. For a brief moment she heard a voice, faint, distorted but familiar. It was him. The engineer's voice echoed through the static. If you're hearing this, the others have already started waking up. Then the screen went black. Her breathing quickened. She turned off the monitor and grabbed the data drive. The hum was louder now, almost like it was reacting to her movements. The air in the chamber felt heavier, and small ripples of blue light started running across the walls. It was time to leave. She rushed up the metal stairs, her boots echoing against the cold metal. Behind her, the sound grew into a deep vibration that made the ground shake slightly. By the time she reached the surface, the sky had turned an eerie shade of green and gray. The wind carried a strange static sound, like whispers in the air. She got into her truck and started driving back toward the town, gripping the steering wheel tightly. The road cracked beneath the tires as distant flashes of light flickered over the horizon. She looked in the rearview mirror. The old station stood dark and still, but above it, a faint column of light reached toward the clouds, twisting like smoke. She didn't stop driving until she was miles away. When she finally reached the edge of the town, she pulled over to catch her breath. Her hands were shaking, her face pale. She looked at the data drive in her hand. The engineer had trusted her with the truth, but the truth was bigger than anyone could handle. That night, as she stayed in the small inn again, she plugged the drive into her laptop and began reading through the files. The information was overwhelming. It showed maps of underground tunnels connecting all the energy cores, one under the deserts, another beneath the Pacific Ocean, and one somewhere near the poles. If even one of them was disturbed, the planet could react again. She realized that what happened to the Empire's fleet wasn't an accident. It was a warning. Earth was trying to protect itself from the destruction caused by human greed and technology. The question now was, how many warnings would it give before it decided to fight back completely? She knew she couldn't keep this to herself, but she also knew that if the Empire found out she had the data, they would come for her. She looked out the window. The snowstorm outside had started again, and through the white haze she could almost hear the faint hum returning. Slow, deep, and endless. She whispered softly to herself, "It's not over." And somewhere far beneath the Earth's surface, the core pulsed once more, brighter than before, as if it had heard her. After returning from the frozen cliffs, she knew her life had changed forever. The data drive in her bag felt heavier than it looked. Every time she thought about it, she could almost hear the faint hum of the core beneath Station 47. She had proof now. Proof that the fleet had been destroyed not by weapons or enemies, but by something far bigger. Something alive. Something the Earth itself had created long before humans walked the planet. She spent the next few days in hiding, avoiding anyone who might be connected to the Empire. She worked at night, poring over the files on the data drive. The more she learned, the more she realized how dangerous the truth was. The files contained detailed records of all the energy cores discovered decades ago, their locations carefully mapped but hidden in coded documents. It became clear that humans had stumbled upon something they were never meant to find, and now that it was awake, it could respond at any time. The world outside carried on as usual, but strange signs were appearing. Satellites picked up unusual energy spikes in different parts of the globe. Volcanic activity increased. Earthquakes shook regions that were normally quiet, and unusual weather patterns appeared almost overnight. Scientists around the world were confused, and governments scrambled to explain the sudden anomalies. But the truth was simpler and more terrifying. The Earth was reacting. She knew she couldn't wait for anyone else to figure it out. She needed to tell the world, but she had to be careful. If the Empire discovered she had the data drive, they would do anything to stop her. Their power was vast, and they had already hidden the truth once. To expose them would mean risking her life. One night she received a message from an encrypted source. "We know what you have. We can help you." It didn't have a name, just coordinates to a safe house far from the northern seas. She didn't trust anyone, but she realized she had no choice. She packed what she could and set out quietly before dawn, traveling through small backroads and forests to avoid being detected. When she arrived at the safe house, she was greeted by a group of scientists and researchers who had once worked in secret with the Empire. They were cautious at first, checking her story and verifying the data. After hours of discussion, they accepted that what she had was real. The energy cores were alive, and the recent disturbances weren't natural disasters. They were Earth defending itself. They showed her simulations of what could happen if the cores were disturbed further. Entire fleets, cities, and even regions could be affected. The energy could destroy human technology in ways that made traditional warfare meaningless. One of the researchers said quietly, "The Earth doesn't want war. It just wants balance. And we've been ignoring that balance for too long." While she learned from them, she also realized that the Empire had not stopped its efforts. Hidden agents were already tracking the northern regions, searching for any signs of the remaining cores. The Empire wanted to control them, to harness the power that the Earth itself had created. If they succeeded, it could give them unstoppable military advantage, but it could also provoke the cores in ways no one could predict. She began working with the team to create a plan. Their goal wasn't to fight the Empire directly, but to protect the knowledge and prevent further interference with the energy cores. They created secure communications, backup copies of the data, and maps marking the locations of all known cores. Each core was treated like a living entity, something sacred that needed protection, not exploitation. Meanwhile, the signs of the Earth's reaction were becoming impossible to ignore. Along the northern coasts, fishermen reported strange lights rising from the sea at night. Birds and fish behaved erratically, moving far from their usual paths. Even the weather seemed to respond to human activity. Sudden storms, intense gusts of wind and lightning strikes appeared where no weather patterns should exist. It was as if the planet itself were alive and watching. One evening, she received an urgent call from a scientist in the team. A new energy surge had been detected near the southern deserts, far from the northern seas. The readings were similar to Station 47, but larger, more intense. The team feared that the Empire might have already disturbed this core. If so, the reaction could be catastrophic. Without hesitation, she joined a small group to investigate. They traveled across deserts, moving quietly and avoiding major towns. The closer they got, the more obvious the energy became. Compasses spun wildly, radios emitted strange static, and even vehicles struggled to operate normally. At one point, a car engine stalled in the middle of the desert, and they had to push it several miles to find a place where it would start again. When they reached the location, the desert was eerily quiet. Sand stretched for miles, broken only by the faint blue glow emerging from deep underground. The team set up monitoring equipment and tried to measure the energy levels. As they did, the ground trembled beneath their feet. Small cracks appeared in the sand, and the blue light pulsed rhythmically like a heartbeat. She realized with growing fear that the core wasn't dormant here. It was aware, and it was responding to them. The air vibrated with low frequency, sound waves that made it difficult to think clearly. Her body felt heavy, her ears ringing with the hum of energy. The scientists whispered to one another, saying that the energy was intelligent, reacting not just to machinery, but to human presence. Suddenly, the pulse intensified. The blue light shot upward from the ground in a thin column reaching into the sky. The team stumbled back in shock. Instruments overloaded, flickering on and off, while small sandstorms formed spontaneously around them. The core was alive, powerful, and unpredictable. They managed to retreat safely, but the event left them shaken. The Earth wasn't just defending itself in one place. It was preparing to react everywhere it sensed human interference. The team realized that they couldn't stop the Earth from responding, but they could guide it. If humans respected the cores and stayed away, the reactions might remain controlled. But if the Empire or others tried to take control, the consequences could be devastating. Back at the safe house, she reviewed the data and noticed something alarming. The readings from multiple cores suggested they were beginning to synchronize. The pulses were no longer random. They were communicating, linking, and responding to each other across continents. The Earth was coordinating its defense. It became clear that the next few weeks could determine the fate of humanity. If the Empire discovered another core, or if the cores reacted violently to human activity, entire regions could be wiped out. The journalist knew she had to act quickly. She had to warn the world without giving the Empire a chance to interfere. The team decided to release parts of the data anonymously, using secure networks and underground channels to inform scientists and environmental organizations worldwide. The goal was to create awareness without attracting the Empire's attention. They wanted people to understand the significance of the cores, that these were living, natural systems, not resources, to be exploited. While she worked on the dissemination of the information, strange occurrences began to happen closer to her safe house. Animals behaved oddly. Dogs refused to leave their yards, birds circled frantically in the sky, and even the local weather seemed unstable, with sudden gusts of wind and flashes of lightning. It was as if the Earth itself was alert, watching. She realized something else. The cores were no longer confined to remote areas. Their influence was spreading. Humans were unknowingly disturbing them simply by existing, driving, building, mining, or even using electricity nearby. Every interference caused a ripple effect, intensifying the planet's awareness. One night, as she watched the data streams on her laptop, the hum from Station 47 reached her ears through the encrypted monitoring system. It was faint, but unmistakable. The northern core was awake again, and it seemed to be signaling something. She felt a chill, knowing that the Earth was beginning to communicate, not in words, but through energy, vibrations, and light. She knew that humanity was standing at a crossroads. The cores could coexist with humans, but only if they were respected and left undisturbed. Any attempt to control them could lead to a disaster far beyond human comprehension, and the Empire, she knew, would never stop trying. Her nights became restless, filled with dreams of glowing light beneath oceans, deserts, and mountains. She saw visions of ships dissolving into blue mist, cities shaking under invisible forces, and humans fleeing from storms they could not understand. She woke each morning more determined. The world needed to know the truth before it was too late. The safe house had become her base of operations, a place where knowledge, secrecy, and survival intersected. She worked tirelessly, mapping energy readings, documenting the core's reactions, and preparing reports for those she could trust. Each file she created felt like a lifeline, a chance to save humanity from its own ignorance. And yet, she knew the Empire was still out there, watching, waiting for a moment to strike. Their agents were relentless, their intelligence vast. Every step she took was being monitored in some way. She had to be careful, not just for her own safety, but for the safety of the Earth itself. Outside, the world remained unaware of the silent awakening beneath its feet. Storms came and went, earthquakes shifted the ground, and strange lights flickered over oceans and deserts. The journalist had been on the move for weeks. Safe houses, back roads, and secret routes were now her daily life. She barely slept, living on coffee and the adrenaline of knowing the Earth itself had awoken. The hums from the cores, once distant and subtle, were becoming louder and more frequent. It wasn't just the northern core anymore. Signals came from the deserts, deep oceans, and even volcanic regions. Every pulse carried intelligence, like the planet was communicating in its own language. But with that awakening came danger. The Empire had discovered that she possessed the data drive. They had already sent specialized teams to track her down. They weren't just after her. They wanted the knowledge, the maps, and the recordings of the core's activity. She knew it was only a matter of time before they cornered her. One evening, while she was checking satellite feeds from a hidden cabin, she noticed unusual energy spikes in the Southern Ocean. Ships, likely Empire vessels, were approaching one of the core's locations. She realized immediately that any disturbance there could trigger another catastrophic reaction, similar to what had happened to the Northern Fleet. Her hands trembled as she plotted a route to intercept them before it was too late. The journey was perilous. Storms raged across the ocean, and the closer she got, the more unstable the equipment became. Her compass spun uncontrollably, and the GPS showed impossible readings. Even the waves seemed to rise in response to her approach. Somehow the planet itself seemed aware that humans were encroaching on its hidden heart. She arrived near the energy site just as the Empire's ships entered the area. Their engines churned the water violently, and spotlights swept the surface. She could see the blue glow pulsing beneath the waves. The core sensed them, and the ocean responded immediately. Waves rose unnaturally high, and the water shimmered, with energy that no human eye had ever seen. The Empire's commanders were confident. They believed in technology, in guns, in steel and fire. They didn't understand the intelligence they were facing. The journalist could only watch as the first disturbance occurred. A column of light shot upward from the core, stretching hundreds of meters into the sky. The waves crashed against the ships with unnatural force, tossing them like toys. Alarms blared, but the systems failed one by one. Engines stalled. Radios emitted only static, and metal groaned under pressure that no human hand had created. From her hiding spot, she recorded everything, her heart pounding. This was proof, undeniable proof, that the Earth itself could act, that it was alive and capable of defending its balance. But the danger wasn't over. The Empire's fleet was still functional in parts, and they were trying desperately to regain control. She realized that if they forced the disturbance further, the consequences would be catastrophic, not just locally, but globally. The core pulsed faster now, reacting to the human intrusion. It wasn't just defending, it was warning, preparing, testing the limits of its power. Lightning-like energy arcs shot up from the water, striking some of the nearest ships. In minutes, the once mighty fleet was crippled, half submerged in the glowing waters. She could see the panic on the sailors, faces through binoculars. Many jumped into the sea trying to survive, but the energy pulses pushed them back. She didn't move closer. Her instincts screamed to stay back. Instead, she transmitted live footage to the encrypted network she had established with her team. Scientists, researchers, and even a few independent media contacts received the stream. The images were horrifying, but also undeniable. Humanity was witnessing the planet defend itself. Back on the mainland, chaos began to spread. Weather systems reacted to the energy spikes. Storms suddenly intensified, winds grew violent, and electrical grids experienced failures in cities thousands of miles away. It was as if the planet's heartbeat was sinking globally, preparing for any further human interference. Governments scrambled to explain it, but the truth was beyond comprehension. The journalist knew she had to act fast. She and her team developed a plan to prevent the Empire from reaching other cores. They couldn't fight the Empire in the conventional sense. Weapons were useless. They had to protect the knowledge and guide humanity's interaction with these hidden forces. Every movement, every decision mattered. Meanwhile, the Empire's intelligence network was closing in. Agents had traced parts of her route and were now surrounding her location. She had anticipated this and had set traps, not deadly ones, but ways to delay and mislead them. Smoke devices, false GPS signals, and timed alarms gave her the advantage she needed. Still, she knew it was only a temporary measure. Sooner or later, she would have to confront them directly, or risk them destroying the cores for control. One night, she observed another unusual event. The hum from the northern core had intensified. For the first time, it wasn't just a rhythm or a warning. It seemed directed, almost like it was pointing to something, a location. She cross-referenced the coordinates and discovered another hidden core under a remote mountain range. The data suggested this core was larger than the northern one, more powerful, and incredibly unstable. If the Empire reached it, the consequences would be unimaginable. She decided to move. Traveling through mountain trails, she avoided towns and kept her presence secret. The journey was exhausting, the terrain harsh, and the energy pulses from the core caused her compass to spin and lights to flicker. But she pressed on, knowing the fate of countless people could depend on her success. When she arrived at the mountain, she discovered the area was already partially disturbed. Signs of drilling and excavation were evident. The Empire had already started probing the site. Her heart sank. She realized she had arrived too late to prevent initial interference, but there was still time to guide the outcome. She quickly analyzed the energy readings and set up stabilization equipment based on the engineer's notes. The core reacted immediately. Blue light surged from beneath the mountain, and the ground trembled. Rocks cracked, and small landslides occurred as the energy tried to find equilibrium. The journalist worked frantically, adjusting controls and following the engineer's instructions, all while recording the process. Every second was critical. If she failed, the mountain core could erupt in ways that no one could survive. Then, the Empire arrived. Helicopters descended from the sky. Soldiers swarmed the area and orders were shouted. They had come to take control, to harness the energy for their own power. She hid behind boulders, trying to stay out of sight while continuing her work. The core pulsed violently. It was no longer responding only to human machines. It reacted to human presence, to intent, and to aggression. Energy arcs shot up around the soldiers, knocking some off their feet and forcing the others to retreat. Their weapons malfunctioned in the field, and for the first time they realized that they were no longer in control. The journalist continued her work, tears streaming down her face from fear and relief. She felt the core recognizing her presence, almost like it understood her intentions were protective, not destructive. Slowly, the blue pulses stabilized. The mountain tremors subsided, and the core's hum returned to a calm, steady rhythm. She had bought time. The Empire was forced to retreat for now, but she knew they would return. As dawn broke over the mountains, she looked at the glowing peak and realized something profound. Humanity was not alone in the struggle to survive. The planet itself was alive, watching, and capable of defending its balance. But it could not communicate in words, only in pulses, lights, and subtle forces. Humans had to learn to coexist, to respect the Earth's energy or pay the price. She transmitted the latest recordings and findings to her network, sending proof to scientists, media, and environmental organizations worldwide. The message was clear. There are forces on Earth that we cannot control, and our survival depends on understanding and respecting them. Exhausted but determined, she set up temporary observation posts near other core sites. She knew the Empire would not stop, and the planet's energy would not remain dormant forever. Every day was a race against time, and every decision could affect the future of humanity. As she prepared for the next stage, the hum of the mountain core echoed in her mind. It was no longer just a warning. It was a presence, alive, patient, and intelligent. And she knew that the next confrontation would not just be with the Empire, but with the raw, unstoppable force of the planet itself. For the first time, she felt the full weight of responsibility. She was no longer just a journalist. She was a guardian of knowledge, a messenger of truth, and a witness to the Earth's hidden power. And somewhere deep beneath the planet's surface, the cores pulsed in silent coordination, waiting for what humanity would do next. The world was waking up slowly to something it had never seen before. The journalist had been transmitting recordings, maps, and data from the cores to her network of scientists and trusted journalists. Governments tried to deny it, and the Empire tried to suppress the information, but it was impossible to hide. People everywhere began to notice strange weather, unusual animal behavior, and the pulses of energy that seemed to affect technology in unpredictable ways. In the northern seas, where the first core had destroyed the Empire's fleet, ships no longer dared to enter. Fishermen spoke of glowing waters at night and strange hums beneath the waves. Scientists called it an anomalous energy phenomenon, but the journalist knew the truth. It was the planet itself defending its balance. The world was being forced to pay attention, whether it wanted to or not. She traveled constantly now, moving from one observation point to another. Each core was different. Some were beneath oceans, others beneath deserts, mountains, or even active volcanoes. Each had a heartbeat, a pulse that could be felt if you were close enough. And each reacted when humans interfered, sometimes violently, sometimes subtly. The Empire was desperate. They had lost entire fleets, and their attempts to probe other cores had failed catastrophically. Engineers, soldiers, and scientists sent to extract energy were either forced to retreat or disappeared without a trace. Equipment malfunctioned, ships were destroyed, communications went dead, and the cores did not discriminate. They responded to all attempts at control. It was becoming painfully clear. No human power could dominate what the planet had hidden beneath its surface. Despite the chaos, she remained determined. She coordinated her team, sharing information and teaching others how to safely monitor the cores without provoking them. She knew it wasn't enough to survive. Humanity needed to learn to respect these forces. Every core that remained untouched was a victory. Every time humans avoided interfering, the Earth stabilized a little more. In the deserts, she observed another core that had become active. Its energy radiated through the sand, creating shimmering waves of heat and light. She had set up monitoring equipment to measure its pulses. As she studied the data, she realized that the cores were beginning to communicate with each other. Their pulses synchronized over thousands of miles. It was subtle at first, just small adjustments in frequency, but soon it became clear that the planet was coordinating its response globally. She sent warnings to local authorities near other core sites, urging them to evacuate non-essential personnel. Some obeyed, but others dismissed the warnings, thinking they were overreacting. The Earth responded. In one mining area, equipment exploded without explanation. Roads cracked and buckled. The workers ran, terrified. News reports described it as natural anomalies, but anyone who understood the data knew the truth. Humanity was being reminded, firmly, but not yet lethally, that these cores were not to be disturbed. The Empire, frustrated and angry, tried to push forward with a global operation. They wanted to take control of every core, but the journalist's data had already been leaked to sympathetic scientists worldwide, and a decentralized effort to monitor and protect the cores had begun. Governments and independent groups worked quietly to mark off dangerous areas and educate local populations. It was not perfect, but it slowed the Empire's attempts. Then came the most frightening moment. She received readings from the Northern Seas Core, the first core that had destroyed the Empire's fleet. Its energy was rising to levels higher than before, pulsing in massive waves beneath the ocean. Satellites showed that currents were shifting in impossible ways, creating giant whirlpools, and deep-sea sensors recorded intense vibrations. If the Empire interfered again, the reaction could be far worse than anything previously witnessed. She acted quickly. Coordinating with local authorities and researchers, she issued warnings to keep all ships away from the area. Her messages emphasized one simple rule: do not disturb the core, do not try to take its energy. She also used drones and remote monitoring equipment to ensure no one entered the danger zone. For the first time, she felt like she had a small measure of control, not over the core itself, but over human behavior. While she watched the monitors, she noticed a pattern emerging. The core's pulses weren't random anymore. They were deliberate, like signals. She compared data from multiple cores across the globe and realized that the Earth was coordinating its defense, sending messages through the energy fields. The planet was alive, not just responding to human interference, but acting intelligently to protect itself and maintain balance. This understanding brought her a mix of awe and fear. Humans had never seen anything like this before. The Earth was no longer just a planet to live on. It was a living, conscious force, capable of defending its systems and correcting human mistakes. And humans had pushed it too far. Over the next weeks, she continued to monitor multiple sites. In the southern deserts, the energy created temporary mirages and heat waves that forced evacuation. In the mountains, earthquakes and strange rock formations emerged where none had existed before. In the oceans, currents shifted dramatically, sinking unmanned vessels that strayed too close. Everywhere, the cores were asserting their presence, teaching humanity a lesson it could not ignore. She also realized the Empire had underestimated the intelligence of the cores. Their fleets and armies were powerless against forces that did not conform to conventional rules. Technology failed, weapons malfunctioned, and the very ground itself acted against them. The journalists' recordings documented everything, proof that the Earth could act as a protector, not just a passive environment. One day, as she monitored the northern seas, she noticed an unusual calm. The blue glow pulsed slowly, evenly. No disturbance, no waves. It was as if the core had paused, watching the world. She felt a strange sense of connection. For the first time, she realized the planet could recognize humans who acted responsibly. Her team's efforts to educate and prevent interference seemed to matter. The Earth had not punished them. It had observed, perhaps even acknowledged their respect. But she knew this calm was temporary. Humanity's curiosity, greed, and recklessness could provoke the cores again. She decided to create a final broadcast, an appeal to the entire world. Using encrypted channels, satellite feeds, and independent networks, she shared the full story. The discovery of the cores, Project Helios, the Empire's fleet, and the global consequences of disturbing these hidden forces. She explained the error science as clearly as possible, but emphasized one crucial point. Humans must respect the cores. They are alive. They are part of the planet. Interference could be catastrophic. Her broadcast spread quickly. Governments tried to suppress it, but it was too late. The public became aware of something much bigger than war, politics, or economy. People began to avoid dangerous areas, explorers hesitated, and even the Empire slowed its operations. Humanity was learning for the first time that there were forces on Earth it could not control. As weeks turned into months, she noticed another change. The energy pulses from multiple cores began to synchronize more calmly. They were no longer reacting violently to humans in general, only to specific interference. It was as if the planet had learned to communicate its boundaries. Humanity had earned a fragile trust. She continued to travel, documenting cores, educating local populations, and recording everything for future generations. The work was exhausting, and the constant awareness of the planet's power was intimidating. But she felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. She was not just a journalist anymore. She was a witness, a guardian, and a messenger. In the final weeks of her observation, she returned to the northern seas. The site of the first destroyed fleet was quiet, calm, but glowing faintly beneath the waves. She stood on the cliffs, watching the hum of energy ripple across the water. The waves shimmered blue, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. It was alive. It had remembered, and it seemed patient, almost peaceful. She understood then what the engineer had always tried to explain. The cores were not weapons, and they were not tools. They were part of Earth itself, a network of living energy designed to protect the balance of life. Humanity had been arrogant to ignore them, and the planet had reminded them of their place. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel hope. Humanity had witnessed something far greater than technology or armies. They had seen the Earth's intelligence and power. If humans could respect it, learn from it, and coexist with it, they might survive. If they could not, The consequences would be beyond comprehension. As she left the cliffs for the last time, the northern core pulsed once more, brighter than she had ever seen. She felt it in her chest, a deep vibration that seemed to say, "We are watching, but we can wait. We can forgive, but balance must be maintained." And so the world began to change quietly. The empire, humiliated and powerless, retreated. Nations slowly adapted to the knowledge of the cores. Humans learned to live with caution and respect for the hidden forces beneath their feet. The journalist's work became a record for future generations, a reminder that the Earth is alive, intelligent, and capable of defending itself, and that humanity is only a part of its greater balance. The cores pulsed on, each heartbeat a silent guardian of the planet, waiting,